On Christmas Eve, my son-in-law changed every lock in my house and sneered, "This is our home now, old man. Get out." I silently packed one single bag and walked into the night. When they woke up, I was gone. And so was the $3 million inheritance. Their phone now shows 94 missed calls, and they have no idea what's really coming for them. Before continuing, subscribe to our new channel, where we tell stories about men who take revenge on their insolent children, sons-in-law, and daughters-in-law. My name is Ralph Cunningham. I'm 67 years old, living in Austin, Texas. Spent 38 years in commercial real estate management before hanging up my briefcase 2 years back. Built a decent life, collected some fine timepieces along the way, thought I had my priorities straight. Family first, they say. Turns out some families have different ideas about what that means. My daughter Danielle used to be different. I remember when she was 7, running to greet me at the door every evening, her gap-toothed smile brighter than the Texas sun. She'd wrap her small arms around my legs and tell me about her day in that rapid-fire way kids do, words tumbling over each other in excitement. That girl grew into a thoughtful young woman who'd call every Sunday just to check in, who remembered my birthday without Facebook reminders, who actually listened when I talked. Then 5 years ago, she met Jason Morrison at some tech industry mixer. He was 36 then, worked as a mid-level manager at a software company, drove a leased BMW he couldn't quite afford, wore suits that cost more than they should for someone in his tax bracket. I noticed these things. You don't spend 4 decades in commercial real estate without learning to read financial desperation in a man's eyes. But Danielle saw something else. Charm, ambition, confidence. She was 33, tired of dating apps and disappointing setups, ready to settle down. I kept my observations to myself. Big mistake. The wedding was nice enough. I paid for most of it, naturally. Jason's contribution was a rehearsal dinner at a restaurant where the portions were small and the prices astronomical. His mother showed up in clothes that screamed, "Trying too hard," and his father didn't show at all. Red flags everywhere, but love is blind, right? Or maybe just willfully ignorant. The first year of marriage, they lived in a cramped apartment in South Austin. Then Jason started hinting. "That big house of yours, Ralph, must get lonely. All those empty rooms." My wife passed 11 years ago, but I never mentioned loneliness to him. The house at 2847 Riverside Drive wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. There's a difference, though. Jason wouldn't understand nuance if it slapped him across his self-satisfied face. 3 years ago, they asked to move in temporarily. Jason's company was restructuring. They needed to save for a down payment. It would be just 6 months, tops. I'm no fool. I knew 6 months meant indefinitely. But Danielle looked at me with those same eyes from childhood, and I caved. Told myself it would be good to have family around. That's what you're supposed to want at my age, isn't it? The changes started small. Danielle redecorated the guest room, then the living room. Jason's golf clubs appeared in my garage, his protein powder in my kitchen cabinets. They'd invite friends over without asking, use my grill for their parties, drink my bourbon while I was out. When I mentioned it, Danielle would smile that tight smile and say, "Dad, we're family. What's yours is ours, right?" Wrong, but I didn't push it. By the second year, they weren't asking permission for anything. Jason would sprawl on my leather sofa like he owned it, feet on the coffee table I'd had for 30 years, barking into his phone about deals and margins. Danielle stopped helping with household expenses, stopped the Sunday calls because why call when we lived together? The warmth drained from her voice when she spoke to me, replaced by something colder, more calculating. She'd look at me sometimes like I was furniture, functional but outdated, taking up space in her house. Her house. That's how she started referring to it around month 20. "We should renovate the kitchen in our house. The backyard of our house needs landscaping." I'd correct her gently. "My house, sweetheart." She'd laugh it off, but her eyes never smiled. I started noticing Jason going through papers in my study 6 months ago. Told me he was just curious about property values in the neighborhood. Found him photographing documents with his phone once. When I walked in, he didn't even look guilty, just annoyed at the interruption. That's when I knew. That's when I should have acted. But I wanted to believe the best. Another mistake. Christmas Eve arrived cold and clear. I'd gone for my usual evening walk through the neighborhood, looking at lights, thinking about better holidays. Got back around 7 p.m., reached for my keys, slid one into the lock. It didn't turn. Tried the other key. Nothing. Checked the address. 2847 Riverside Drive. Definitely my house. Tried again. The deadbolt had been changed. I rang the doorbell, waited, rang again. Jason opened the door. Didn't step aside. Just stood there in the entrance of my home, backlit by my chandelier, wearing that smirk he'd probably practiced in mirrors. Keys don't work, old man? Jason, what's going on? The locks? Yeah, changed them today. Security upgrade. He leaned against the doorframe, completely blocking entry. We've been talking, Danielle and me. This arrangement isn't working anymore. Arrangement? My voice stayed level. Years of negotiating commercial leases taught me not to show emotion when someone's trying to provoke you. You living here, in our house. My house, Jason. The deed has my name on it. He laughed. Actually laughed. See, that's the thing about deeds. They can change. And we've decided this place is wasted on one old guy rattling around. We're taking over. You're out. Where's Danielle? Right here, Dad. Her voice came from behind Jason. She stepped into view but stayed back. Arms crossed, eyes fixed somewhere over my left shoulder. Couldn't meet my gaze. Wouldn't meet my gaze. Sweetheart, you're going to let him do this? Silence. She shifted her weight, looked at the floor. Jason's smirk widened. This is our home now, old man. We're done playing house with you. Time to move into a nice retirement community. Make some friends your own age. We'll handle things here. This is my property. You can't just... Can I? He stepped closer, voice dropping to something uglier. You're 67, starting to forget things, getting confused. Who's going to believe you're capable of managing a property like this? We've been the ones really running this place for years. Everyone knows it. The Austin winter air felt colder suddenly. I looked past Jason to my daughter. Danielle? She opened her mouth, closed it, turned away. That's what I thought, Jason said. You've got 30 minutes to grab some essentials. Then you're gone. We're changing all the locks tonight. Oh, wait, already did that. He jangled a new set of keys. Funny how that works. I could have fought. Could have called the police right then. Made a scene. Claimed my rights. 38 years in real estate taught me something useful, though. Never negotiate from emotion. The man who keeps his head wins. 30 minutes, I said quietly. I'll need to pack properly. Jason's eyebrows rose. Surprised I wasn't yelling, probably. Disappointed, maybe. Men like him enjoy confrontation, feed on other people's distress. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Fine. 30 minutes. Not a second more. He stepped aside finally, and I walked into my own home like a guest. Danielle had disappeared upstairs. Couldn't face me, apparently. That told me everything about how deep this betrayal went. The daughter I raised would have fought for me. This stranger wearing her face just wanted me gone. I went to my bedroom, the master bedroom I'd slept in for 40 years, and pulled a single duffel bag from the closet. Clothes first, not many. Enough for a few days. I had a feeling I wouldn't be homeless for long, but I needed to appear compliant, defeated even. Let them think they'd won. The safe was behind a painting of Lake Travis my wife loved. Jason and Danielle didn't know about it. They'd never shown enough interest in my belongings to discover it. Inside, passport, birth certificate, property deeds, stock certificates, my late wife's jewelry I'd planned to give Danielle someday. That plan just died. Also there, a USB drive with scanned copies of every important document I owned. Call it paranoia or preparation, but when you've spent 4 decades dealing with commercial contracts, you learn to keep backups. All of it went into the bag. My watch collection lived in a custom cabinet in the study. 43 pieces, accumulated over decades. Some inherited, some purchased, all meaningful. The crown jewel, a 1952 Patek Philippe Calatrava, worth $87,000 at current market value. I'd bought it 15 years ago as an investment and a passion piece. It was in a hidden compartment in the cabinet's false bottom, installed specifically because valuable watches attract attention. I opened that compartment now, removed the Patek Philippe, left everything else. Let them find the main collection. Let them think that's all there was. Let them learn what happens when you count someone else's money before they're in the ground. The rest of the packing was quick. Toiletries, medications. A few photographs from before Danielle married Jason. I had no use for recent pictures. A book I'd been reading, my laptop, the essentials. 23 minutes had passed. I walked downstairs with my bag. Jason lounged on my sofa, his sofa now in his mind, drinking my bourbon. Danielle stood by the window, still not looking at me. All set? Jason asked, not getting up. Yes. Good. Leave your keys on the table. I set them down carefully. House keys, car keys to the sedan in the garage. I'll need transportation. Call a cab, or walk. I don't really care which. He took another drink, eyes gleaming with victory. I pulled out my phone, called for a taxi. 5 minutes away. We waited in silence. Danielle pretended to examine her fingernails. Jason scrolled through his phone, occasionally chuckling at something. I stood by my duffel bag in the foyer of the house I'd bought in 1984, paid off in 2003, maintained meticulously for 40 years. The cab arrived at 10:40 p.m. I picked up my bag. Jason followed me to the door. As I stepped onto the porch, he called out, "Hey, old man, don't forget, this is our house now. Tomorrow we start cleaning out your junk, selling what's worth anything. Rest goes to Goodwill. Hope you didn't leave anything important." He laughed, slammed the door. I heard the new deadbolt click into place. The cab driver, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, must have seen something in my face. "Rough night? Could be worse," I said, and I meant it, because standing on that porch, locked out of my own home by my daughter and her parasite husband, I felt something unexpected. Clarity. "Four Seasons Hotel, please." We drove through Austin's holiday-lit streets. Houses glowed warm with Christmas trees, families visible through windows. Exactly the kind of scene Hallmark movies are made of. My phone buzzed. Text from Danielle. "I'm sorry it had to be this way." Not sorry she did it. Sorry it had to be this way, as if she'd had no choice. As if I'd forced them to throw me out on Christmas Eve, already rewriting history to soothe her conscience. I didn't reply. At the hotel, I checked into a suite. The night clerk gave me a sympathetic look. Old man, single duffel bag, checking in alone on Christmas Eve. Probably thought I'd had a fight with family. He wasn't wrong. Upstairs, I spread my documents across the desk. Deeds, trust papers, financial statements, bank information, everything I'd prepared 6 months ago when I first saw Jason photographing my property documents. You don't survive 38 years in commercial real estate without learning to read people and plan for contingencies. When I noticed Jason's interest in my assets, I'd started making arrangements. Quiet arrangements, legal arrangements, arrangements that would now pay off in ways he couldn't possibly anticipate. I picked up my phone. 11:15 p.m. on Christmas Eve. Late to call anyone, especially a professional contact. But this was urgent. Stuart Hoffman answered on the third ring. "Ralph, everything okay?" Stuart was 52, one of the best real estate attorneys in Austin. We'd worked together on dozens of deals over the years. Professional relationship, not friendship, but built on mutual respect. "Stuart, I need your help. Tonight. I know it's Christmas." "What happened?" I told him. Briefly, factually. No emotion. Silence on the other end. Then, those documents we prepared 6 months ago? Time to execute them. I'll be there in 40 minutes. Start making coffee. I hung up and looked at the Austin skyline through my window. Somewhere out there in my house on Riverside Drive, Jason and Danielle were probably celebrating, popping champagne, planning how they'd spend my money. They had no idea what was coming, and that's exactly how I wanted it. Stuart arrived at midnight carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than Jason's monthly salary. Not that I was counting. Well, maybe I was. Numbers matter when you're building a case. He ordered coffee from room service, spread his own documents across the table next to mine, and got to work. No small talk, no pity. Just professional efficiency, which was exactly what I needed. "Walk me through the timeline again," he said, pulling out a yellow legal pad. I did. 6 months ago, Jason photographing documents. 5 months ago, my first consultation with Stuart about restructuring my assets. 4 months ago, establishing the Revocable Living Trust. 3 months ago, transferring the house into that trust. 2 months ago, moving my financial assets into a separate trust structure. 1 month ago, finalizing everything, making sure every signature was witnessed, every document notarized, every legal requirement met to the letter. You were thorough, Stewart said, reviewing the papers. Paranoid, even. Prepared, I corrected. There's a difference. He smiled slightly. Fair enough. So they changed the locks without your permission? Without my knowledge. I discovered it when I couldn't get into my own house. That's trespassing and illegal lockout in Texas, especially given the property ownership structure. He made notes. They're residing there under what legal basis? None. It was an informal arrangement. I let them stay temporarily 3 years ago. No lease, no rental agreement, nothing in writing. Even better, in Texas, that makes them tenants at will. You can terminate that arrangement with proper notice, which we'll provide via the sheriff's department. He checked his watch. It's past midnight now, technically Christmas Day. We need a notary. At this hour? I know someone. Morris Johnson. He owes me a favor, and he's discreet. Stewart pulled out his phone. You'll want this documented properly. Every step by the book, so Jason can't claim procedural irregularities later. While Stewart made calls, I stood at the window watching Austin sleep. Somewhere in that darkness, my daughter was in my house, probably asleep in the master bedroom. Did she feel guilty? Doubtful. People who feel guilty don't stand silently while their spouse throws their father into the street. I thought about the timeline differently now. Not 6 months of preparation, 38 years of preparation. Every contract I'd negotiated, every legal detail I'd memorized, every professional relationship I'd built. Jason thought he was facing a confused old man. He was actually facing 4 decades of accumulated knowledge and connections. The irony was almost funny. Morris Johnson, the notary, arrived at 2:45 a.m. He was 59, slightly overweight, wearing sweatpants under his winter coat. But he brought his seal, his credentials, and no questions beyond the professional ones. Mr. Cunningham, he nodded. Stewart must have briefed him. We spent the next 35 minutes finalizing documents. Stewart had prepared a notice of termination of tenancy, citing the illegal lock change as grounds for immediate eviction. In Texas, that's permissible when a tenant materially breaches the rental agreement, or in this case, the informal living arrangement. Morris notarized everything. His seal made official what my signature had started. This goes to the sheriff's office? Morris asked Stewart. First thing when they open, which is... Stewart checked his phone. In about 5 hours. After Morris left, Stewart packed up his briefcase. You should get some sleep. Will they fight this? Of course they'll fight. Jason will yell about family rights, how he's been maintaining the property, how you're mentally unfit. Standard playbook. Stewart paused at the door. But Ralph, everything we've done is airtight. The house is in a trust where you're the sole beneficiary. Danielle was never added as a beneficiary, so she has no legal claim. Your financial assets are similarly protected. Even if Jason hires the best attorney in Texas, which he can't afford, he'll lose. How long until they're out? Texas law requires 72 hours from service of notice in cases of lease violation. Given that they change locks illegally, a judge would likely enforce that timeline strictly. Call it 3 days, maybe 4. After Stewart left, I sat in the quiet hotel room. 3:20 a.m., I should have been exhausted. Instead, I felt energized, focused. For 3 years, I'd watched them take over my space, my peace, my home. Watched Danielle transform from my daughter into someone I barely recognized. Watched Jason's contempt grow bolder. I'd told myself I was being patient, understanding, accommodating family. I'd been lying to myself. I'd been afraid. Afraid of conflict, of losing Danielle completely, of being the bad guy in some family drama. So I'd absorbed the insults, the takeover, the disrespect. Christmas Eve changed that. When Jason locked me out of my own home and Danielle said nothing, not a word of protest, not a moment of hesitation, something shifted. Fear transformed into something colder, clearer. I pulled out my laptop and opened a spreadsheet I'd been maintaining for 6 months. Every observation, every incident, every piece of evidence. Line 47. Jason photographing property documents without permission. Line 63. Danielle referring to my house as our house in front of her friends. Line 81. Jason opening my mail from the bank. Line 92. Danielle asking about my will, specifically what I'd left her. Line 118. Jason measuring rooms, making notes about renovation costs. The pattern was clear. This wasn't sudden. They'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. The lock change was just the final move in a game I hadn't realized we were playing. Well, now I knew the rules. I closed the laptop and finally lay down on the hotel bed, turned off the lights, stared at the ceiling. My phone sat on the nightstand, silent. No calls from Danielle. No text beyond that one hollow apology. She'd made her choice, and I'd made mine. At 8:15 a.m., Stewart would deliver the eviction notice to the Travis County Sheriff's Department. By noon, maybe earlier, a deputy would knock on my door, their door in their minds, and hand them papers that would shatter their victory celebration. I wondered how Jason would react. Anger, definitely. Lots of shouting, threats about lawsuits that would go nowhere. And Danielle? Would she understand then what she'd done? Would she realize that silence has consequences? Probably not. People like that never do. They'd blame me, paint themselves as victims, tell friends and family that crazy old Ralph had lost his mind, thrown out his own daughter on Christmas. Let them. I had documentation, witnesses, a paper trail that would stand up to any scrutiny. I turned over, punched the pillow into a better shape. For the first time in 3 years, I fell asleep without listening for footsteps in my hallway, voices in my kitchen, evidence that my home wasn't my own anymore. The sleep was deep, dreamless, peaceful. The next morning, Christmas Day, I woke at 11 a.m. Later than I'd slept in years. The hotel room was quiet, sunlight streaming through gaps in the curtains. My phone showed 6 missed calls, all from Danielle, no voicemails. She never liked leaving messages, preferred texting, but there were no texts either, just the calls, wanting me to answer so she could say, "What? More hollow apologies? Demands that I come back and accept their coup?" I deleted the call log and ordered breakfast from room service. While I ate, I thought about timing. Stewart was delivering the eviction notice around 8:15 a.m. Standard procedure meant the sheriff's department would assign it to a deputy who'd drive out to Riverside Drive. That could take anywhere from 2 hours to 6, depending on their queue. So Danielle and Jason were probably still basking in their victory, unaware that legal machinery was already grinding toward them. I imagined the scene, them sleeping late in my bedroom, waking up leisurely, making breakfast in my kitchen, planning their day, maybe discussing which of my possessions to sell first. The watch collection would be tempting, 43 pieces in that cabinet, some worth serious money. Except they wouldn't find the Patek Philippe, and the rest, while valuable, weren't nearly as valuable as they'd assume. I'd bought smart over the years, but I'd also bought what I loved, not just what would appreciate. Some of those watches were worth $2,000, maybe $5,000. Not the fortune Jason probably imagined. The thought made me smile into my coffee. My phone rang. Danielle again. I let it go to voicemail. This time she left a message. "Dad, it's me. We need to talk. About yesterday. I know you're upset, but this doesn't have to be ugly. We can work something out. Call me back, please." Work something out. Interesting phrasing. Not, "we made a terrible mistake," or "please come home." Just work something out. Like we were business partners negotiating terms, not a father and daughter navigating betrayal. I deleted the voicemail. Around 1 p.m., I left the hotel. Drove to a storage facility I'd rented 2 months ago under the trust's name. Austin Vault and Storage on the east side. The kind of place that asks no questions and maintains excellent security. Inside Unit 247, I'd been stockpiling things. Important documents Jason and Danielle didn't know existed. Backup copies of my entire watch collection's authentication certificates and purchase receipts. Photographs of my house's original condition before they'd started redecorating. Financial records going back 15 years. I also had a second set of items here. Things I'd quietly removed from the house over the past 6 months. My wife's jewelry. Some antique books. A painting worth $34,000 that had hung in my study until I'd replaced it with a cheaper reproduction. Small valuations that added up. Jason and Danielle would inventory my belongings and think they knew what I owned. They'd be wrong by roughly $200,000. I photographed everything in the storage unit, documented it, added the images to my digital archive, then locked it back up and drove to a different location, a bank branch where I had a safety deposit box separate from my main accounts. Inside that box, additional documentation, cash reserves, and a letter I'd written 6 months ago. Instructions for what to do if things went exactly as they had on Christmas Eve. Reading that letter now felt surreal. Past Ralph had predicted present Ralph's situation with uncomfortable accuracy. The lock change, the eviction, Danielle's silence, all of it. But past Ralph had also planned the response. Every step mapped out, every contingency considered. I returned the letter to the box and drove back to the hotel. At 2:20 p.m., my phone erupted with calls. Danielle, then Jason, then Danielle again, then a number I didn't recognize, then Jason again. I muted the phone and continued reading the news on my laptop. The calls continued. Every few minutes, a pattern of desperation that told me the sheriff had arrived. At 3:15 p.m., my phone showed 23 missed calls. Still muted, I checked the voicemails. Jason's voice tight with fury. "You think you're clever, old man? Those papers mean nothing. I've got rights. We'll see what a judge says about this." Danielle crying. "Dad, please pick up. There's a sheriff here saying we have to leave. This is crazy. We can fix this. Just call me back." Jason again. "This is harassment. You're harassing your own daughter. You senile." The message cut off. An unknown number. Probably their attorney. "Mr. Cunningham, this is Derek Paulson from Paulson and Associates. I'm representing Jason and Danielle Morrison regarding the property dispute. Please contact me at your earliest convenience." I saved that one. Knowing who was representing them would be useful. More calls from Danielle, more crying, more pleading, each message a variation of the same theme. This was unfair, unexpected, fixable if I'd just talked to them. None of them said, "We're sorry we threw you out." None of them said, "We were wrong." None of them acknowledged what they'd done, just surprised that actions had consequences. I opened a fresh document on my laptop and began drafting a timeline. Not for legal purposes, Stewart had that covered. This was for me, a record of exactly how events unfolded, preserved while details were fresh. My phone buzzed with a text from Stewart. "Sheriff served notice at 14:20. They have 72 hours. Confirm property ownership via trust documents." Jason made threats. Deputy noted it in report. I texted back, "Thank you." Stewart, "They'll lawyer up. Be prepared for contact from their attorney." Me, "Already happened. Derek Paulson. Stewart, know him. Decent attorney. Can't fix a losing case, though." That evening, I had dinner in the hotel restaurant. Steak, medium rare, a glass of wine. The server was attentive without being invasive. The meal was excellent. While I ate, I thought about Danielle's calls. 23 of them, plus voicemails, plus texts that were probably piling up now. She wanted to talk, wanted to work something out. But what she really wanted was for me to undo the consequences of her choices, to pretend Christmas Eve never happened, to hand over my home, my assets, my future like it was her birthright, rather than my life's work. The old Ralph might have wavered, might have called her back, listened to her tears, considered compromise, but something had broken on that porch when the door slammed in my face. Some fundamental assumption about family, about loyalty, about what people owed each other. I finished my steak and ordered dessert. My phone showed 31 missed calls now. I turned it face down on the table and enjoyed my chocolate cake in peace. Later, back in my room, I sat by the window with my laptop, pulled up the trust documents Stewart and I had created, read through them again, making sure I understood every clause, every protection, every failsafe. The house was protected. My financial assets were protected. Even my watch collection, the pieces still in the house, were itemized in trust documents, with photographic evidence of their existence and condition. Jason could destroy them out of spite, but he couldn't sell them legally, and if he tried, I had remedies. Legal remedies that would cost him far more than any watches were worth. I thought about tomorrow, the day after Christmas. 72 hours from now, Jason and Danielle would be out of my house. They'd have to find somewhere else to live, pack their belongings, face the reality of their situation. And then what? They'd regroup, plot their next move. Jason would push for litigation, probably. Try to claim some legal right to my property or assets. It would fail. Stewart had made sure of that. But they'd try anyway, which meant I needed to think several moves ahead. Not just evict them, not just protect what was mine, but ensure they couldn't come back, couldn't manipulate, couldn't try this again in different forms. I opened a new document and started typing. Strategy, next steps. Under that heading, I listed possibilities, options, moves, and countermoves. By midnight, I had a framework, not complete yet, not ready to execute, but forming, taking shape. I looked out at Austin's skyline, Christmas lights still twinkling, families probably exchanging gifts, sharing meals, being together. My phone sat silent now. The calls had stopped around 10 p.m. Either they'd given up for the night, or their attorney had told them to stop harassing me. Smart advice, if so. Every call, every message, every voicemail was documentation of their desperation. I saved my documents, backed everything up to secure cloud storage, and finally prepared for bed. Tomorrow would bring new developments. The 72-hour clock was ticking. Jason and Danielle would scramble, scheme, search for leverage they didn't have. And I would watch, plan, prepare. Because this wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about something simpler. Showing people exactly who they'd chosen to betray, and making absolutely certain they understood the cost. 2 days passed in silence. Well, not complete silence. My phone kept ringing. By the end of the second day, the missed call count had climbed to 47. Danielle mostly, but Jason too, his voicemails progressively angrier. Their attorney, Derek Paulson, left 3 messages. Professional, measured, requesting a conversation. I saved those. The contrast between his calm legal tone and Jason's rage-filled rants would be useful if this went to court. On the 3rd morning, I finally answered. Not because I'd softened, not because 47 calls had worn me down, but because the 72-hour eviction window was closing, and I wanted Danielle to understand something before they left my house for good. She picked up on the first ring. "Dad, thank goodness. I've been trying to reach you for days. I know. 47 calls. We need to talk. This whole thing is a misunderstanding. We can work this out." "Danielle," my voice cut through her pleading, "there's nothing to work out. The sheriff served you an eviction notice. You have until tomorrow morning to leave my property." "Your property?" Her voice shifted, tears giving way to something sharper. "Dad, I'm your daughter. That house should be mine someday. We were just what? Speeding up the inheritance timeline by throwing me into the street?" Silence on the other end. Then sniffling. The tears were back. "It wasn't like that. Jason thought he could bully an old man out of his home, and you stood there, silent. Not one word of protest. I was shocked. I didn't know he was going to... Don't lie to me, Danielle. You knew. Maybe not the exact timing, but you knew. You've been calling my house our house for over a year. You've been asking about my will. You and Jason have been planning this." More silence. Then, "We just needed help. Jason's been under so much financial pressure, and we thought..." "You thought you could take what wasn't yours." Her voice hardened. "What about the inheritance you promised me? $3 million, you said. You told me I'd be taken care of. I never promised you anything. I said you'd be provided for. Past tense. That was before Christmas Eve. You can't do this. I'm your only child. And you made your choice. On Christmas Eve, you chose Jason's greed over your father's dignity. Now you live with that choice. Please." The tears were flowing now. I could hear it in her voice. "We'll move out. We'll apologize. Just don't cut me off completely. That money, we need it. Jason owes $127,000 in debts, and without your help..." There it was. Not, "I'm sorry for what we did." Not, "I was wrong to betray you." Just, "We need your money." Danielle, listen carefully. You stood silent while your husband threw me out of my home on Christmas Eve. You didn't defend me. You didn't stop him. You chose his side. There are consequences for that choice. But the inheritance? I never promised you an inheritance. You assumed. There's a difference, a very large difference. I could hear Jason's voice in the background asking what I was saying. Danielle's hand muffled the phone, their voices arguing. Then she was back. Dad, you don't understand. We were counting on that money. We have plans. Your plans aren't my responsibility. Not anymore. You're being cruel. After everything you've what? After you moved into my house temporarily and stayed 3 years? After you took over my space, my belongings, my peace? After you let your husband lock me out on Christmas Eve? She was crying harder now. I didn't mean for it to happen like that. But you let it happen. That's what matters. I hung up, turned off the phone, sat in the hotel room watching Austin wake up through the window. The conversation left a bitter taste. She still didn't understand. Still thought this was about money, about inheritance, about what she was owed. She didn't grasp that this was about respect, about dignity, about a daughter who watched her father get thrown into the cold and said nothing. That evening, I received an email from Derek Paulson, professional, outlining his client's position. They were willing to vacate the property as ordered, but they wanted to discuss equitable distribution of assets and reconciliation of verbal commitments regarding inheritance. I forwarded it to Stewart with a note. They're fishing. No verbal commitments were ever made. Stewart's response came within minutes. Understood. I'll draft a response. They have no legal standing, but Paulson's doing his job. The next 10 days were a blur of legal maneuvering. Jason hired Paulson to challenge the trust documents, claiming I'd been unduly influenced, that I lacked mental capacity, that Danielle had a verbal contract for inheritance. All of it failed. Stewart had documented everything meticulously, every signature witnessed, every document dated and notarized, medical records showing I was completely competent, bank statements proving I'd managed my own affairs without assistance. By the time the judge reviewed the case, it took less than 20 minutes to dismiss Jason's claims entirely. The eviction happened on schedule. I wasn't there. Stewart advised against it, and I had no desire to watch them pack. But he sent me updates. They'd damaged some items before leaving. Broken picture frames, scratched furniture, small, petty acts of revenge that only proved who they really were. I documented everything through the property manager I hired. Photographs, itemized lists. Total damage, $23,400. I filed a civil suit for damages. Jason and Danielle would owe me money now, not the other way around. 2 weeks after Christmas, my phone showed 94 missed calls. I'd kept it off mostly, only turning it on to check messages from Stewart and handle necessary business. The voicemails were predictable. Danielle begging, Jason threatening, their attorney trying to negotiate, a few from people I didn't know, probably friends of theirs trying to mediate. I deleted them all. They'd moved to Jason's mother's apartment, I learned from Stewart, a small 2-bedroom on the east side of Austin. The mother wasn't happy about it, according to gossip Stewart had picked up. 2 adults crammed into her space, just like they'd crammed into mine. Poetic, really. Then Jason lost his job. His employer found out about the legal troubles, the eviction, the lawsuit, the failed challenge to my trust documents. Called it a reputational risk and let him go. Without income, Jason couldn't pay his debts. Credit card companies started calling. Collection agencies got involved. The $127,000 he owed became $135,000, with penalties and interest. I learned all this not from investigation, but from public records, court filings, credit reports that appeared in legal discovery. Everything was documented, official, part of the legal machinery grinding them down. I didn't cause Jason's job loss, didn't call his employer, didn't spread rumors. I didn't have to. His own actions, changing my locks illegally, the eviction proceedings, the failed lawsuit, created a paper trail any HR department could find with a basic background check. Consequences have a way of cascading. 10 days after the eviction, I returned to my house. The property manager met me at the door with keys, new locks, changed again after Jason and Danielle left. We walked through together, documenting damage. The master bedroom, where I'd slept for 40 years, looked like a tornado had passed through. They'd taken the mattress, fine, I'd planned to replace it anyway, but they'd also broken the antique bed frame my wife had loved. Deliberately. The wood was splintered, not cracked from moving. Someone had taken something heavy to it. In the study, books were scattered on the floor. My desk had deep scratches across the surface. The leather chair had a slash through the seat cushion. Small damages. Petty damages, but damages nonetheless. The property manager tallied everything, took photographs, wrote notes. $23,400, he confirmed. Maybe $24,000 if the hardwood floor damage is worse than it looks. I nodded. File everything with my attorney. Add it to the civil suit. After he left, I walked through the house alone. It felt different. Emptier, yes, but also cleaner. Like a sickness had been removed. 3 years they'd lived here. 3 years of gradually taking over, pushing boundaries, treating my home like their property. And now they were gone. I stood in the living room where Jason had sprawled on Christmas Eve, drinking my bourbon and smirking. The sofa looked smaller now, less imposing, just furniture, not a symbol of occupation. My phone rang. I'd turned it back on that morning. Danielle's number. I let it go to voicemail. 5 days later, I had a meeting scheduled with Regina Collins, an estate planning attorney Stewart had recommended. She specialized in complex inheritance situations, particularly cases where family dynamics were complicated. Regina was 44, sharp-eyed, with the kind of professional demeanor that suggested she'd seen every family drama imaginable and remained unimpressed by all of them. We met in her downtown office. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Congress Avenue, expensive furniture, law degrees from prestigious universities on the wall. Mr. Cunningham, she greeted me, Stewart briefed me on your situation. You want to revise your estate plan. Completely rewrite it? I corrected. She pulled out a yellow legal pad. Walk me through what you're thinking. I did. My current assets. The house at 2,847 Riverside Drive, currently valued at $1,850,000. Financial assets in various trusts and accounts totaling $2,847,000. My watch collection professionally appraised at $890,000. Other personal property, maybe another $100,000. Total estate value, roughly $5,687,000. And your current beneficiary? Regina asked. Was my daughter. Sole beneficiary. Everything went to her. Was? I'm changing that, effective immediately. Regina made notes. What would you like to do instead? I'd thought about this carefully, planned it during those quiet hotel nights, refined it while walking through my empty house. 3 charitable beneficiaries. Dell Children's Hospital. They do excellent work, and I want to support pediatric care. The Austin Homeless Shelter, because I know what it's like to be locked out of your home now, and the Firefighters Relief Fund. Regina's pen moved across the page. Equal distribution? Yes. Split it evenly. The house, the financial assets, everything. Sell what needs selling. Distribute the proceeds. And your daughter? $1. That's the standard amount to show she wasn't forgotten, just excluded intentionally. What about her husband? Jason Morrison gets nothing. He's not blood family, so there's no need to leave him even a token amount. Regina looked up from her notes. Mr. Cunningham, I have to ask. Are you certain about this? Completely disinheriting your only child is... I'm certain. Family dynamics change. People reconcile. You might regret. I won't. She studied my face for a long moment, then nodded. All right. I'll draft the documents. You'll need witnesses, ideally people who can attest to your mental competence, if this gets challenged. It will get challenged, I said. Danielle will try to overturn it. Based on what grounds? Undue influence, mental incompetence, whatever her attorney suggests. Regina smiled slightly. Then we'll make this bulletproof. Medical evaluation showing cognitive function, multiple witnesses, video recording of the signing, a statement of intent explaining your reasoning. When I'm done, this will be the most challenge-proof will in Travis County. We spent the next 2 hours working through details. Every asset cataloged, every contingency planned, every potential legal challenge anticipated and defended against. When we finished, Regina gathered her notes. I'll have draft documents ready in 3 days. We'll schedule the formal signing with witnesses and a notary. Thank you. One more thing. She hesitated. Your daughter will find out about this. Probably sooner than you'd like. Someone always talks. Bank employees, legal assistants, someone in the chain of documentation. I know. How do you want to handle that? However it happens, I'm not hiding this from her. She made her choice on Christmas Eve. This is mine. 2 days later, Danielle found out. I don't know how. Maybe her attorney had connections. Maybe someone at the bank mentioned something. Maybe she'd been monitoring my activities somehow. But she found out. The call came at 2:30 p.m. I was having coffee in my study, my actual study now, no longer invaded by Jason's protein powder and golf magazines. Dad, I just heard something crazy. Her voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear panic underneath. Someone said you changed your will. That's not true, right? I set down my coffee cup. It's true. Silence. Then, what do you mean it's true? I rewrote my entire estate plan. New beneficiaries. New? What are you talking about? I'm your daughter. Yes. And you'll receive $1, standard amount for intentional exclusion. I could hear her breathing on the other end, fast, shallow. $1? Dad, that's insane. You have almost $6 million in assets, and you're leaving me $1? That's correct. Where's the rest going? Charity, Dell Children's Hospital, the homeless shelter, the firefighters' relief fund. Charity? Her voice cracked. You're giving millions to charity instead of your own daughter. Yes. Why? Because of Christmas? Because we made one mistake? One mistake. I kept my voice level, calm. Danielle, you didn't make a mistake. You made a choice, a deliberate, calculated choice to stand silent while your husband threw me out of my home. You chose Jason's greed over your father's dignity. That wasn't a mistake. That was who you revealed yourself to be. We were desperate. Jason's debts aren't my problem. They never were. I'm your daughter, she was crying now, full sobs. You can't do this to me. I already did. She tried speaking, but the sobs made words impossible. I waited. Eventually, she managed. Please, please don't do this. I'll do anything. I'll leave Jason. I'll apologize. Whatever you want. Danielle, the problem isn't Jason. The problem is you. You're the one who stood silent. You're the one who let it happen. You're the one who showed me exactly what our relationship means to you. Less than a house. Less than money. Less than whatever Jason promised you. That's not fair. Fair? You want to talk about fair? Is it fair to throw a 67-year-old man onto the street on Christmas Eve? Is it fair to change the locks on his own house? Is it fair to count his money before he's dead? Through the phone, I heard Jason's voice in the background, asking what was happening. Danielle's voice, muffled. He changed his will. Everything goes to charity. Jason's response was loud enough I could hear it clearly. He can't do that. Get that lawyer back on the phone. You can try to challenge it, I said calmly. Derek Paulson can file whatever motions he wants. But Regina Collins is one of the best estate attorneys in Texas, and she made this will challenge-proof. You'll lose, and you'll waste money you don't have on legal fees. Dad, please! I hung up, set the phone on my desk, picked up my coffee. Through the window, Austin looked peaceful, sunny, normal. My daughter was probably crying in her mother-in-law's cramped apartment, her husband raging about money they'd never have, their futures crumbling around them. And I felt calm, not happy. This wasn't a victory to celebrate. I'd lost my daughter, or rather learned I'd lost her years ago and only now accepted it. But calm, clear, like a decision made, a path chosen, a necessary amputation completed. The phone rang again. Danielle? I sent it to voicemail. It rang again. Jason this time. Voicemail. 6 more calls over the next hour. All ignored. Finally, a knock at my door. I looked through the peephole. Danielle stood on my porch, red-eyed, mascara streaked, hands trembling. I opened the door, didn't invite her in, just stood in the doorway, blocking entry, the same way Jason had blocked me on Christmas Eve. Dad, her voice was raw. Please, can we talk? We just did, on the phone. I mean, really talk. Face to face. Please. I looked at her, my daughter, the girl I'd raised, loved, provided for, the woman who'd stood silent while her husband threw me into the cold. Danielle, there's nothing left to say. I'll leave Jason. I'll divorce him. I'll do whatever you want. Just please don't cut me off completely. And there it was, the calculation: leave Jason, not because it was right, not because she regretted her choice, but because she thought it would get her the inheritance back. The problem isn't Jason, I repeated. The problem is you. You allowed this to happen. You made your choice. I made a mistake. No, you made a choice. And now you're not sorry about the choice. You're sorry about the consequences. That's different. Very different. Her face crumpled. Please. I looked at her without anger, without pity, just clarity. You stood there on Christmas Eve and said nothing. Not one word in my defense. You chose silence when I needed you most. That's not something an apology can fix. I closed the door, heard her crying on the other side, heard her fist pound once, twice, then footsteps retreating down the walkway. Watched through the window as she got into a car, not Jason's BMW, that had probably been repossessed, and drove away. My phone showed new voicemails. I deleted them without listening. The house was quiet again, finally completely mine. I poured fresh coffee, settled into my chair, and pulled up the charity websites on my laptop. Dell Children's Hospital, the homeless shelter, the firefighters fund. They didn't know it yet, but in a few years, or months, or decades, depending on how long I lived, they'd receive a substantial donation. Money that would help kids, help the desperate, help the people who risk their lives for others. Better uses than funding Jason Morrison's debts or Danielle's calculated attempts at reconciliation. My phone rang again. I turned it off. The silence was perfect. A month passed. February brought cold rain to Austin, the kind that makes everything gray and miserable. Appropriate weather for what was happening to Danielle and Jason. I learned about the divorce filing through Stewart. He'd kept tabs on their situation, not because I asked, but because he was thorough. Professional vigilance in case they tried something new legally. Danielle filed papers last week, he mentioned during one of our monthly check-ins at his office, citing irreconcilable differences. I sipped the coffee his assistant had brought. How convenient. You think it's strategy, to get back in your good graces? I know it is. I set down the cup. She thinks if she leaves Jason, I'll soften. See her as the victim of his influence. Restore her to the will. Stewart made a note on his legal pad. Will you? No. He nodded. Didn't try to convince me otherwise. That's why I kept working with him. He understood that some decisions were final. The divorce itself was messy. I didn't follow it closely, but information filtered through. Jason contested it, claiming Danielle was abandoning him during financial hardship. The irony was thick enough to choke on. He'd thrown me out during Christmas, but her leaving during his crisis was somehow betrayal. Credit collectors were circling them both now. The $127,000 in debts had grown to $143,000 with penalties, interest, and legal fees from their failed challenge to my trust documents. Neither of them could pay. Jason's mother kicked them out after 6 weeks. Apparently, his late-night rages and Danielle's constant crying wore through even maternal tolerance. They moved to separate cheap apartments on opposite sides of Austin. Danielle found work, office manager at a small accounting firm, $38,000 a year. For someone who'd spent 3 years as a housewife in a $1.85 million home, the adjustment must have been brutal. I knew all this not from investigation, but from the Austin grapevine, mutual acquaintances, people who'd ask me carefully probing questions. Ralph, I heard about Danielle's new job. Must be hard for her, such a change. I'd nod noncommittally and change the subject. Meanwhile, I was settling into a comfortable rhythm, attended a watch auction in Houston, acquired a 1960 Omega Speedmaster for a reasonable price, had dinner with old colleagues from my commercial real estate days, visited my physician for a routine checkup. Perfect health for 67, he said. Important documentation for Regina's challenge-proof will. On the last day of February, a letter arrived, hand-addressed envelope, Danielle's handwriting, 8 pages inside, covered with her familiar loops and curves. I made coffee before reading it. The letter started with apologies, detailed, specific apologies for Christmas Eve, for the years of taking advantage, for standing silent, for choosing Jason over me. She acknowledged everything, took responsibility, said she understood why I was angry. Then came explanations, How Jason had manipulated her, isolated her from friends, convinced her that my money was rightfully theirs. How she'd been weak, scared, desperate. How she'd made terrible choices under his influence. More apologies, promises to change, evidence of change, the divorce filing, her new job, therapy sessions she'd started attending. Then on page 7, the request. Not for the full inheritance. Just some help. Just, a chance to rebuild. Just acknowledgement that I'm still your daughter despite my mistakes. Page 8 included specific numbers. Could I help with her security deposit? Maybe co-sign a car loan. Perhaps a small monthly stipend until she got on her feet. I read it twice, then set it aside and stared out the window. The letter was good, well written, emotionally intelligent. It hit all the right notes: accountability, remorse, hope for redemption. But there was one problem. If she'd truly changed, truly understood what she'd done, the letter would have ended on page 6, after the apologies, after the acknowledgement of fault. The fact that pages 7 and 8 asked for money told me everything I needed to know. She was still counting my assets, still calculating what she could extract. The only difference was sophistication. Instead of demanding inheritance, she was requesting help. Different packaging, same product. Stewart called the next afternoon. Danielle's attorney reached out. They'd like to arrange a mediated conversation between you and your daughter. Neutral territory, professional mediator present. What's the goal? Reconciliation, supposedly. But I'd bet they want you to agree to something in writing, maybe a trust for her benefit, maybe a commitment to help financially. Tell them no. You don't want to hear what she has to say. I already did. 8 pages. It ended with her asking for money. Silence on the line. Then a quiet laugh. Of course it did. If she'd truly changed, Stewart, she would have apologized and asked for nothing. The fact that she can't separate remorse from financial requests tells me everything. Understood. I'll decline on your behalf. I spent that evening in my study, surrounded by my watch collection. 43 pieces now, including the new Omega. Each one a story. Each one chosen carefully, appreciated fully. The Patek Philippe sat in its case on my desk. $87,000 of Swiss engineering and artistry. I'd taken it from the house on Christmas Eve, the only piece I'd rescued. Sometimes I wondered if Jason had found the rest of the collection yet. If he'd opened that custom cabinet and discovered the hidden compartment. If he'd realized what he'd lost when he threw me out. Probably not. Jason was too focused on what he couldn't have to notice what he'd already lost. My phone rang. I'd started keeping it on again, number changed, only distributed it to people who mattered. Unknown number. I almost declined, then curiosity got the better of me. Mr. Cunningham? A woman's voice, young, professional. This is Amanda Chen from the Austin American-Statesman. I'm working on a piece about charitable giving in Austin, and your name came up in my research. Would you have time for a brief interview? I considered. What kind of piece? Human interest. Local philanthropists. What motivates their giving? Impact on the community? Nothing invasive. How did you get my name? Dell Children's Hospital mentioned you've been in contact about potential future donations. Ah. Regina must have notified them as part of the estate planning. Professional courtesy, letting them know they were beneficiaries. I haven't made any donations yet. I understand. But the hospital administrator spoke very highly of your planned contribution, said it would significantly expand their pediatric cardiac wing. I thought about it. Publicity wasn't my goal, but maybe public acknowledgement of where my money was going would make one thing clear to Danielle. Reconciliation wouldn't change my plans. All right, brief interview. My home, next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Cunningham. After hanging up, I smiled slightly. Danielle would read that interview, see the charitable plans laid out in newsprint, understand that her letters and mediation requests were pointless. Maybe then she'd finally stop calculating and start accepting. Or maybe not. But either way, the message would be clear. March arrived with better weather but worse behavior from Jason. Stewart called on the 3rd of the month. You should know, Jason Morrison hired a private investigator, guy named Marcus Webb. He's been asking questions about your financial dealings, looking for irregularities in the trust documents. Will he find any? No, but he's also spreading rumors, talking to your former colleagues, suggesting you're mentally declining, that you've been manipulated by predatory attorneys who convinced you to disinherit your daughter. I leaned back in my chair. My reputation can handle it. I know, but you should be prepared. Some of your old contacts might reach out, concerned. They did. Over the next week, I received calls from 3 former colleagues. Polite, careful inquiries about my well-being. Was I sure about my estate decisions? Had I considered the family implications? Perhaps a second opinion from another attorney? To each I gave the same response. I appreciate your concern. My decisions are made with full mental clarity and legal guidance. The situation is more complicated than you've heard, and I'm confident in my choices. Most accepted this. A few pushed harder, clearly primed by Jason's investigator. I remained polite, but firm. The investigator himself, Marcus Webb, showed up at my door on a Tuesday morning. Early 50s, cheap suit, of the kind of face that had seen too much and expected worse. Mr. Cunningham, I wonder if I could ask you a few questions about your estate planning. No. I'm working on behalf of your daughter, sir. She's concerned about... My daughter can communicate with me directly if she has concerns, through appropriate legal channels. She says you won't return her calls. That's correct. He tried a different angle. Sir, I've been reviewing public records. The speed of your asset restructuring, the timing around your daughter's residence in your home. Some might say it looks like a pattern of retaliation rather than sound financial planning. I smiled. Cold. Some might say a lot of things. Do you have actual questions, Mr. Webb? Or just insinuations? I'm trying to understand. You're trying to find something to challenge my legal decisions. You won't. Every document is properly executed, properly witnessed, and properly filed. My mental competency is documented by my physician. My decisions are supported by legal counsel. You're wasting your time and Jason Morrison's money. He's not paying me. Your daughter is. With what money? She makes $38,000 a year. Webb shifted uncomfortably. That's between me and my client. Then we're done here. I stepped back and closed the door. Watched through the window as he walked to his car, making notes. Let him investigate. He'd find nothing because there was nothing to find. But Jason wasn't done. The rumors intensified. Whispers at the country club I occasionally visited. Awkward silences when I joined professional gatherings. Someone even left a voicemail suggesting I might want to reconsider my stance before permanent damage was done to my relationship with Danielle. I ignored it all. 38 years in commercial real estate had built a reputation stronger than Jason's desperate gossip campaign. Then the first week of April, Jason escalated. I was in my study reviewing some investment statements when I heard shouting outside. Looked out the window to see Jason on my front lawn, clearly intoxicated, yelling at my house. You think you're so smart, old man? You think you can just throw us away? I called the police, calmly. Gave them my address and a description. Jason continued raging. That money should be Danielle's. You're a selfish, vindictive... The rest was incoherent. He stumbled toward the porch, tried the door, locked, obviously, then kicked it. Once, twice. I watched from the window. Didn't engage, didn't go outside. Just documented everything with my phone camera. The police arrived 7 minutes later. 2 officers, professional and patient. They approached Jason carefully, tried to calm him down. He swung at one of them, missed badly, and that was the end of his freedom. They arrested him for public intoxication, disturbing the peace, attempted assault on an officer, and vandalism to my property. The door had a noticeable dent from his kicks. I gave a statement, showed the video footage, pressed charges. Jason spent the night in jail. Danielle bailed him out the next morning. I learned this from the police report Stewart obtained. Then my phone rang. Danielle's number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Dad, her voice was ragged, exhausted. Please, Jason's losing his mind. He's drinking, making threats. I don't know what to do. Please help me. Help you how? I don't know. Talk to him. Drop the charges, something. He's spiraling and I'm scared. Then leave. Go somewhere safe. There are domestic violence resources. I can't afford to go anywhere. I have barely enough for rent and food. That's not my problem, Danielle. He's threatening you. Doesn't that matter? The police have it documented. If he comes near my property again, he'll be arrested. That's how the system works. You're my father, she was crying now, full breakdown. Please, I'm begging you. I made mistakes, but I don't deserve this. Help me. I thought about Christmas Eve, about standing on my own porch, locked out, listening to Jason's taunts while Danielle stood silent. You chose him, Danielle. You stood there and chose him over me. Now he's your problem to solve. But I'll give you this advice. If he's threatening you, call the police. If you need shelter, here are the numbers for women's services. I texted her 3 contact numbers for domestic violence support organizations. That's your help? Phone numbers? That's more than you gave me on Christmas Eve? Silence. Then she hung up. I blocked her number. Should have done it weeks ago. Stewart called an hour later. Jason Morrison's attorney is requesting a restraining order against you, claiming you're harassing his client through false police reports. I laughed. Actual laughter. He kicked my door while drunk and swung at a cop. It's on video. I know. The motion will fail, but it shows their desperation. Good. Let them be desperate. 2 weeks later, Danielle's divorce from Jason finalized. No assets to split, only debts. She got $73,000 in credit card debt. He got $70,000. The legal fees added another $12,000 each. They destroyed themselves financially, legally, and socially, all because they couldn't resist trying to steal what wasn't theirs. I received one more letter from Danielle after the divorce, shorter this time, only 2 pages. It said she understood now, said she accepted my decision, said she didn't expect forgiveness or money. Said she just wanted me to know that she finally understood what she'd lost, and it wasn't the inheritance. It was almost convincing. Then the last paragraph asked if we could have coffee sometime. Just talk. No agenda. I filed the letter with the others, documented evidence of persistent contact, despite clear boundaries, and I didn't respond. Because the problem wasn't that Danielle didn't understand. The problem was that she understood perfectly, and still couldn't stop trying to manipulate the situation. Some people never learn, but I had. On Christmas Eve, standing on that porch, I learned exactly who my daughter was, and I'd acted accordingly. May arrived with warmth and clarity. Spring in Austin at its finest. Blue skies, comfortable temperatures, the kind of weather that makes you appreciate being alive. I'd been planning the charity auction for weeks. Regina Collins connected me with the development director at Dell Children's Hospital, a sharp woman named Patricia Morrison. No relation to Jason, thankfully. She helped coordinate everything. 12 watches from my collection, carefully selected pieces that would attract serious collectors while serving a greater purpose. Not the Patek Philippe, that stayed with me, but quality timepieces nonetheless. A 1968 Rolex Submariner, a 1971 Omega Speedmaster, a vintage Cartier tank, others. Combined estimated value, $340,000. The auction took place at a downtown hotel ballroom. Patricia had worked miracles with publicity. Local philanthropists attended, business leaders, the mayor, and press. The Austin American Statesman sent their reporter, Amanda Chen, who'd interviewed me weeks earlier. I wore a simple dark suit, nothing flashy. Let the cause speak for itself. The event started at 6 p.m., cocktails and networking, then the auction itself. I circulated through the crowd, shaking hands, making small talk. Several people mentioned they'd read about my planned charitable contributions. Word had spread through Austin's philanthropic circles. Mr. Cunningham, the mayor approached, hand extended. Patricia tells me you're making a significant contribution to pediatric cardiac care. The hospital does important work. I'm fortunate to be able to support it. We need more citizens like you. He lowered his voice slightly. I also heard about your family situation. I'm sorry you're going through that. I kept my expression neutral. Thank you. Sometimes the right choice isn't the easy one. He nodded, understanding in his eyes, and moved on to greet other guests. The auction began at 7:15. A professional auctioneer Patricia had hired worked the crowd expertly. Each watch came with documentation, provenance, condition reports, authentication certificates. Serious collectors leaned forward, studying the pieces. The Rolex Submariner went for $42,000. The Omega Speedmaster for $38,500. One by one, my watches found new homes. The crowd was enthusiastic, competitive. By the time the last piece sold, we'd raised $347,000, 7,000 more than the estimate. Patricia hugged me. This is incredible. This will fund the entire expansion of the cardiac wing. I shook hands with the winning bidders, thanked them for their generosity, posed for photographs, accepted congratulations from people I barely knew. Then Amanda Chen appeared with her notebook. "Mr. Cunningham, could I get a few words for tomorrow's paper?" We found a quiet corner. She asked about the collection, about what motivated the donation, about future philanthropic plans. I chose my words carefully. Material possessions have value, but only if they serve a purpose beyond ownership. These watches will help children who need cardiac care. That matters more than having them sit in a cabinet. What inspired this particular donation? I paused, measuring my response. Sometimes life teaches you what really matters. Family relationships can be complicated. Sometimes they disappoint us. But that doesn't mean we stop doing good in the world. In fact, disappointment from those closest to us can clarify what we truly value. Amanda wrote quickly. Are you referring to your daughter? I'm referring to the fact that we all face disappointments. The question is whether those disappointments make us bitter or motivate us to help others. I chose the latter. Your daughter Danielle, she's been through a difficult divorce recently, correct? I met her eyes steadily. I don't discuss family matters publicly, but I will say this. Sometimes the hardest disappointments come from the people we love most. That doesn't have to stop us from making positive contributions to society. She nodded, understanding the boundary. And your future plans? Continue supporting causes that matter. Dell Children's Hospital, the homeless shelter, the Firefighters Relief Fund. When my time comes, my estate will support these organizations substantially. The interview wrapped up. Amanda thanked me, promised to send me the article before publication. The event wound down around 9 p.m. I said my goodbyes, declined invitations to after-parties, drove home through Austin's quiet streets, feeling settled, peaceful. The article ran 2 days later, front page of the local section. Local philanthropist raises $347,000 for Children's Hospital. Amanda had quoted me accurately. My comments about disappointment from loved ones were subtle enough, no names mentioned, but anyone who knew the situation would understand. I was having breakfast when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost declined, then recognized the area code. Local. Against my better judgment, I answered. Dad. Danielle's voice. Not her regular number. She must have used someone else's phone to get past my block. I read the article. Then you know where my priorities lie? You talked about me, to the press, without naming me, but everyone will know. I talked about values, about choosing purpose over bitterness. If you see yourself in that, perhaps you should examine why. Silence. Then, there's a hospital fundraiser next week, reception for major donors. Patricia Morrison sent me an invitation. I used to volunteer there years ago. I'm coming. That's your choice. I want to talk to you, face to face, please. I should have said no, should have hung up. But curiosity, or maybe the need for absolute closure, made me pause. If you attend the fundraiser, I'll listen to what you have to say. Once, that's all. Thank you. That's all I'm asking. She hung up before I could change my mind. The hospital fundraiser fell on an evening when spring was showing off. Perfect weather, clear skies, the kind of night Austin does best. I arrived early. The event was in the hospital's new conference center. Ironically, in the wing my future estate would help expand further. Patricia greeted me warmly, introduced me to board members and major donors. Danielle arrived at 7:30. I saw her across the room before she saw me. She'd lost weight, the stress diet of financial collapse and divorce, wore a conservative dress, minimal makeup, looked older than 38, worn down. Our eyes met. She approached slowly, carefully, like approaching a skittish animal. Dad, Danielle, thank you for agreeing to talk. You have 5 minutes after my remarks to the donors. I gave my speech at 8 p.m. Brief words about the importance of pediatric cardiac care, about community responsibility, about using resources to help those who can't help themselves. The crowd applauded. Patricia thanked me publicly for my contribution. Afterward, I found Danielle waiting near a side hallway. We walked to a quiet alcove away from the main event. You wanted to talk. She took a breath. I've been in therapy. Real therapy, not just to manipulate you. Working on understanding what happened. Why I made the choices I made. Good for you. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know what I did was unforgivable. Standing there while Jason threw you out, that was... Her voice broke. That was the worst thing I've ever done. I waited, said nothing. I'm not asking for the inheritance back. I'm not asking for money. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand. Not just with my head, but really understand. What I destroyed wasn't the inheritance. It was us. And that's on me, not Jason. You're right. It is. She wiped her eyes. I keep thinking about Christmas Eve. About that moment when I could have spoken up. Could have stopped him. And I just didn't. I don't even know why. Fear, greed, stupidity, all of it. The why doesn't change what happened. I know. She looked at me directly. I just needed you to know that I know, that I'm not still making excuses. I did this, me, and I have to live with that. I studied her face, searching for calculation, for manipulation, for the angle. Found only exhaustion and genuine regret. But regret isn't the same as redemption. Danielle, I kept my voice even. Let me ask you something. If I hadn't had any money, if I was just a poor retiree living in a modest apartment, and Jason had thrown me out on Christmas Eve, would you be here now? Would you have gone to therapy? Would you have realized your mistake? She opened her mouth, closed it. The silence stretched. That's what I thought, I said quietly. You're not sorry about betraying me. You're sorry about the consequences. Those are very different things. No, that's not. She struggled. I'm sorry about betraying you. I really am. But you're right that the consequences made me face it. Does that make it less real? It makes it insufficient. I reached into my jacket pocket, pulled out an envelope. I'm going to give you something, not because you deserve it, not because it changes anything between us, but because I don't want you completely destitute. She took the envelope with shaking hands, opened it. Inside, a check for $50,000. This is the last money you'll ever receive from me. Use it to rebuild, get training, start over. But understand this, we're not family anymore. That ended on Christmas Eve when you chose silence. Dad. This isn't negotiable, Danielle. This isn't the beginning of reconciliation. This is the end. Take the money. Build a new life. But I won't be part of it. Tears streamed down her face. Can't there be a path back, eventually? I thought about that porch, the locked door, her silence, Jason's smirk, 3 years of them taking over my home, the assumption that my money was theirs. No, she crumpled. Not theatrically, just a slow collapse of hope. She'd known, I think, but hearing it made it real. Thank you for the money, she whispered. I know I don't deserve it. You don't. But I'm giving it anyway. Consider it your inheritance. All of it. I walked away, didn't look back. Heard her crying behind me, but I kept walking. Patricia found me near the exit. Everything all right? It will be. 2 weeks later, I sat in Regina Collins' office for the final signing. The will had been prepared, reviewed, approved. 3 witnesses present, Regina's law partners. Morris Johnson, the notary, ready with his seal. Regina walked me through each clause. The house to Dell Children's Hospital. They'd sell it, use the proceeds for equipment and staffing. My financial assets split between the hospital, the homeless shelter, and the firefighters' fund. The remaining watch collection to be auctioned, proceeds divided among the same charities. Total estate value, $5,687,000. Danielle's portion, $1. Jason Morrison's portion, 0, as he wasn't related by blood. I signed. The witnesses signed. Morris notarized everything. It was done. Challenge proof? I asked Regina. As close as legally possible. Video recorded signing, medical documentation of competency, clear statement of intent. If she tries to contest it, she'll spend whatever money you just gave her on legal fees and still lose. Good. That evening I sat in my study. My real study now, free from invasion. The house was quiet. Peaceful. Mine. My watch collection sat in its cabinet. 31 pieces left after the auction, each one chosen, appreciated, valued, not for their price tags, but for what they represented. Precision, craftsmanship, time itself made visible. I poured coffee, sat in my favorite chair, looked out the window at Austin's skyline. My phone sat on the desk, silent. No calls from Danielle, she'd finally accepted reality. No calls from Jason, he'd moved to Dallas, Stewart had mentioned. Chasing new schemes, new victims probably. I thought about the last 5 months. From Christmas Eve locked out of my home to this moment, sitting in complete peace. Was I happy? Not quite. Happiness seemed too simple a word for what I felt. Satisfied maybe. Vindicated. Certainly free. Free from expectation, free from manipulation, free from the burden of family members who saw me as a resource rather than a person. The money would do good. Children would receive cardiac care. Homeless people would find shelter. Firefighters would get support when they needed it. Better uses than funding Jason's debts or Danielle's calculated redemption attempts. Outside, the city lived its life. Cars passed, people walked. The world turned, indifferent to one old man's family drama, which was exactly how it should be. I finished my coffee, wound my Patek Philippe, the one possession I'd saved from Christmas Eve, watched the second hand sweep smoothly around the face. Time moves forward. Events happen, consequences follow. Justice, I'd learned, isn't always about revenge. Sometimes it's simply about ensuring that actions have appropriate outcomes, that people who choose greed over loyalty, silence over support, theft over respect, face the natural results of those choices. I hadn't destroyed Danielle and Jason. They destroyed themselves. I just declined to save them. For the first time in 5 years, really, for the first time since Danielle married Jason, I felt completely at peace with my life. Not happy, not sad, not angry, just clear. And that I'd learned was worth more than any inheritance. If you like this story, subscribe to our new channel and listen to a few stories there. You can find the link to it in the collaboration or description of this video, or in the comments. Subscribe so you don't lose us, because this channel may soon cease to exist.